In classic Jujutsu Kaisen fashion, the jumping has officially begun and I'm so hyped to talk about it, so without further ado, let's get into this week's epic chapter. So this chapter starts out with us getting confirmation on how Yuta's domain expansion works. As we saw in chapter 249, he used Oro's technique Thin Icebreaker after picking up a random sword that was scattered throughout his domain. And after using her technique, the sword dissipated in his hands. But in this chapter, we receive confirmation that the real name of Yuta's domain expansion is all-encompassing, unequivocal love. And what it does is allows him to choose any one of his copy techniques to imbue the barrier as the domain's guaranteed sure hit. And all his remaining copy techniques are scattered randomly among the katanas within his domain. Only Yuta is capable of using the katanas, but he's unsure which curse techniques are held inside each of them until he holds it for the first time. And that while each katana can only be used once, there's an infinite amount of them inside of the domain. Okay, so this is insane and has been predicted by a lot of the fan base that his domain expansion will be broken, but actually seeing it written by JJK just confirms that Yuta is truly a game changer in the world of Jujutsu. There are countless interactions that he could have between the different sure hits he selects for the domain, as well as the countless curse techniques that he's copied. This makes me curious about the nature of how his sure hit mechanism works. Could Yuta potentially change the sure hit at will within the domain? Or would he have to reactivate his domain, designating a different one? Also, I think the aspect of chance is a genius way for JJK to not make Yuta completely busted and spam his most overpowered copied abilities endlessly. So without a doubt, I think this explanation alone puts Yuta's domain expansion amongst the most useful and potent in the series, given truly how many different applications it has. So getting into this chapter's fight, Yuta uses Drew's Shikigami technique to send multiple Rikas flying towards Sukuna. As he reflects the incoming Shikigami, Yuji lands a punch straight to Sukuna's side, but he blocks with one of his spare arms. We then see Sukuna shake, similar to how he was when Yuji attacked him in chapter 244. If anything, this panel reinforces that Yuji's punches are actually doing real damage to Sukuna. As Rika flies in from above, Sukuna barely dodges and we see him get slashed across the back. Now, I was unclear on how this actually happened, but I assume it might be Drew's Shikigami ability, but Sukuna mentions how it must have been a technique that applies a barrier to Rika's path. Next, we see Yuta T-posing like a beast when he pulls across the sky, ready to launch another Thin Icebreaker at Sukuna. It's at this point when the King of Curses begins to think to himself that after his fight with Gojo, not only is he unable to expand his domain, but his reverse curse technique output is much slower. Additionally, he comments that his cursed energy is most likely around the same level as Yuta's. And even further, he can't use his world-cutting slash since he has to keep Hollow Wicker Basket active and can't do both at the same time. Before Sukuna finishes his final comment, we see Rika hold Yuji like a missile and launch him at Sukuna, which I thought was kind of hilarious but also so sick at the same time. Darting over to Sukuna, Yuji prepares to land a dropkick while Yuta flanks from the other side with one of his curse technique imbued katanas. Sukuna, blocking both of them from each direction, continues his monologue when he says, "There's this," referring to Yuji's attacks. He mentions how it's the same logic behind his effective attacks against Mahito, confirming that Yuji is very in tune with the soul and has the ability to attack it directly. Specifically, Sukuna says that Yuji is aiming for the barrier between his and Megumi's soul and causing disharmony in the body he's occupying. Every time that he takes an attack from Yuji, his cursed energy output drops and his Hollow Wicker Basket weakens. Once that happens, Sukuna points out that they'll attempt to use Angel's technique Jacob's Ladder to eradicate the cursed object in Megumi. Okay, so this is absolutely insane, and I feel as if Sukuna is at his most pressured he's been since starting his fight with Gojo and the rest of the Jujutsu sorcerers. If you guys remember, Jacob's Ladder is basically a huge beam of light that's capable of outright eradicating cursed spirits and objects without prejudice. We saw that it completely negated the effects of the prison realm and was able to damage Sukuna really badly. So if he were to get hit with this attack in the current state he's in, odds are very likely that him and Megumi will be separated from one another. Yuji then puts Sukuna in an armbar while Yuta attempts to slash him from his other side. Then the patch of slashes begin to form on Yuji as Sukuna tries to free up one of his arms. That's when Yuta brings out Inumaki's cursed speech technique, giving the command, "Don't move." Quickly picking up another sword, Yuta launches another Thin Icebreaker at Sukuna. Alright, I would have to think through some calculations here, but I'm wondering what the probability of picking up the same curse technique actually is in Yuta's domain. Let's say Yuta had, I don't know, 100 copied abilities. The odds alone of choosing the same curse technique are super low, but Anyway, I digress. Sukuna goes flying through pillars and gets battered around by Rika as Yuta and Yuji chase after him to keep the pressure on. The King of Curses then makes a stance similar to that of how Gojo releases his hollow purple and countless slashes are seen hitting Yuta and Yuji. Kicking Rika away, he places his hand on her fist, slicing off a huge part of her arm. Sukuna, annoyed by the fact that he won't be able to kill Yuji or Yuta unless he makes direct contact with them, commends the Jujutsu High students on their toughness, also commenting that the sure hit of Yuta's domain is only applied to him, noting that a feat such as this requires a very sophisticated barrier technique. Alright, so this just further cements Yuta as being an insane Jujutsu prodigy and someone who is on his way of surpassing his mentor Gojo. We've seen before in Gojo's fight with Jogo that he has to be touching someone so they're not affected by his domain's sure hit. It's possible that Yuta has achieved a level of control over his domain expansion that Satoru Gojo wasn't even able to attain. Like Gojo had predicted, this is truly the dawn of a new age of sorcerers that excel beyond the level of special grade. Sukuna then asks the two what they've been up to this past month, to which hilariously, Yuji says hard work and determination, while Yuta mentions that they cheated. Now, it's unclear what they actually mean by this, but it made me laugh seeing the difference between the optimistic Yuji and the realistic Yuta. Yuta then comments on how if it weren't for the after effects of Sukuna's battle with Gojo, they would have all been torn apart instantly, while Yuji comments that he doesn't even want to imagine the state that Sukuna will recover to if they can't stop him right here and now. Continuing the fight, Yuta, Yuji, and Rika surround Sukuna as he fends them off with his two arms. Okay, as much as I dislike Sukuna as a character for all the terrible things he's done, you can't deny how insanely powerful he is, taking on potentially the strongest raw curse in the series, the current strongest modern sorcerer, and a character capable of adapting at insane speeds and damaging the soul itself. Sukuna is truly a monster and powerhouse. As Yuta points his sword at Sukuna, we see a glowing square illuminate on his chest. So this is Charles's curse technique, a super minor character who appeared in the beginning of the Culling Games and faced off against Hakari. He had the ability to essentially draw on the opponent in order to see briefly in the near future. And this is exactly what Yuta is doing here as he punches Sukuna square in the face. The King of Curses then begins freaking out about the sheer number of curse techniques Yuta has been displaying when he wonders if he could copy the Limitless, but then stops himself, knowing it's impossible without the Six Eyes. Yuta, knowing that even Sukuna will be caught off guard by a curse technique he hasn't seen yet, grabs another sword and pulls off another sky manipulation ability. Stabbing at Sukuna, he dodges and grabs the sword when Yuta then says, "Cleave," slicing Sukuna with the same patched pattern we've seen time and time again. Sukuna, absolutely shocked by this, says, "This is my," when we cut to the end of the chapter. Okay, so this is absolutely insane and super hype at the same time. Just seeing Sukuna hit by his own curse technique is so satisfying to watch. Now, I'm slightly concerned since in this chapter they were absolutely bodying Sukuna, and I'm worried that when this happens, only bad things really follow. But I guess we'll have to see what ultimately happens. We know for a fact Sukuna has yet to reveal his black box ability, and that's gotta be happening pretty soon. I think the entire fanbase can sense it. I'd love to hear all your thoughts, ideas, and comments on this super sick chapter. Also, if you'd like to check out a video analyzing the special grade Yuki Tsukumo, check out this video. Stay curious, anime fam. Peace.